We've talked about how we can know there's a God. We've talked about which God. We've talked about questions related to dinosaurs and fossils. But one of the questions that people always seem to want to talk about is cavemen. What about a caveman? And my first question is, what's a caveman? Hey, look at the guy sitting next to you. Boy, pretty ugly, right? You want to see a caveman? Put him in a cave and look at him or at her. And what you're going to see is a caveman or a cave woman. But it's important to understand that cave people are just people that live in caves. Now you say, well, what about this stuff? And you've seen this advertisement for a very popular magazine, a very popular book series that they have, and there's newer versions of this. This one was way, way, way back 30 years ago, but the new versions are very, very similar in many respects. The question is, what kind of evidence do we have for this? And how do we sort out this business about the fossils? Now, first of all, let me show you a fossil. There's a fossil. Now, as you look at that fossil, I want you to tell me something. How much hair did this guy have? Did he have a lot of hair all over him, or was he beautiful like me? No hair. Can you tell? So you're never going to see hair preserved as a fossil. Can you tell me about how big his ears were? How do you know he didn't have great big ears like Dumbo? Or maybe little tiny ears? Can you tell? You can't tell, can you? You can't tell about his skin. How about his nose? Did he have a little tiny nose? Or did he have a nose that looks like this? Now, you have to understand that this monkey, the proboscis monkey, has a skeleton that's like lots of other monkeys. I mean, if you found this monkey's skeleton and two or three others about the same size, you wouldn't be able to tell that he had a great big huge nose like that. You're never going to see a petrified nose. See, that's never preserved as a fossil. And a lot of times people who are artists and who have a lot of skill in this type of thing will give you a beautiful picture that really probably is not too accurate of what the individual really looked like. Let's take an example of this. This is a specimen that appeared in Life magazine for a long period of time. Now, man, Life, isn't that beautiful? Man, I'll bet he had the ability to play a really cool trumpet. He played a great trumpet. Look at that embouchure. Can you tell that from the kinds of material you just looked at? Hey, look at that nose. Man, alive, that guy driving down the street, he could say, hey, there's a McDonald's 3 blocks over. He could smell it that far. Look at that nose. And huge supraorbital ridges. Those are the ridges up on top of his eyes. And notice the chest. Boy, was that guy a great football player. Man, he could throw a football 800 yards. And look at those hands. And look at the muscles in those legs. And look at that toe. Look at that toe. He had a brachiated toe. Now, what that means is that his toe was like my thumb. He could grab hold of a tree limb with his feet, and that left his hands free to fight with. Do you know how much evidence the artist had that made that drawing? You know how many bones he actually had before him? He had one single tooth. One single tooth. The name of the specimen is Sinanthropus, and it was based upon a single tooth, which incidentally a guy bought in an apothecary shop in China. Now, can you tell me what his lips look like from a tooth? Can you tell me what a nose looked like from a tooth? Can you tell me how big the leg muscles were from a tooth? Can you tell me whether he had a brachiated toe from a tooth? Now, there's nothing wrong with people making drawings and guessing at what a specimen might have looked like. But when you portray something as being factual, when you only had a single tooth, which you didn't even find in the ground, That's really not the way scientists work. And so in charts like this, when you find specimens, you have to understand that sometimes there's a lot of artistic guesswork going on. And we really don't understand scientifically a lot of what has taken place. And actually, in this particular chart, until you get to Neanderthalensis, way over here on the right-hand side, all of these specimens, you have much less than a complete specimen. So the first point that needs to be understood about all this is that there really isn't very much evidence to give a totally factual picture of how living things have changed. But you also understand that people have changed. How big were people in the time in which Jesus Christ lived? Do you know that we've never found a skeleton from the area where Jesus lived that was taller than 5'3"? That's about right here on me. You ever see the mummies of the pharaohs in Egypt? How big were they? Yeah, they were pretty small, weren't they? I mean, some of them were under 5 feet tall. People are much larger today in general. Do you know before the Second World War, the average Japanese person was only about 5 feet tall? And they had a brain size that was less than a liter? You know what a 2-liter bottle of pop is? Less than a liter. Today, our brain sizes are up around 1,500 cc's, 1.5 liters. Been a huge change. So it's important to understand that the evidence question is an issue. You also have to understand that people are different racially because of where they live in the world. And so people in tropical areas will usually have dark skin because dark skin is a design feature that God has given them to live in a very hot climate. And if you start in Africa and you look at people that have lived in Africa for many generations, they'll be very dark. And as you move from Africa up into Egypt, and you move on up into Palestine, and you come on up into Lebanon and Greece and Portugal and Spain and France and Sweden, what's happening to the skin color? Getting lighter. What's happening to the eye color? Getting bluer. The hair color? Getting blonder. God did not design man just to live where you live. And so people are different racially. And many times there's a confusion in a chart like this with the racial issues. It's important to understand that as scientists study the fossil record of man, they see that man has changed. But they don't see something that's half man, half lizard, or half man, half something else. The Bible says God created man. Now, it doesn't tell us when God created man. It doesn't tell us what man looked like. I'm sure he did not look like me. He was much better looking than I am. And it's important also to understand that God gave man all of the tools that he needed to live in the environment in which he lived. As scientists study the fossils, they find that many of the fossils are found in caves. Now, if you got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and you have to spend that first night, where are you going to go? There's no Motel 6. I suggest it's very likely that early man lived in caves, where he only had to defend one direction, where he was out of the wind and the snow, where, in fact, he could live with reasonable security. It's also important to understand that man has migrated, that man has moved through the world. And as man has moved, he has changed as he has adapted to different kinds of climates. So as we've already pointed out, people that moved south became dark-skinned and adapted to that kind of equatorial climate. People that moved to the north changed to fit that kind of climate. The people that we call Eskimos, the Denali, they have an extra fat layer which helps insulate them against the cold. Diet and all of the conditions that were present have modified man. And scientists study this. So in anthropology, you learn about the history of man. And it's great, it's exciting, there's marvelous things you can learn about man by studying the history in the fossils and the history as seen in anthropological evidence. The Bible says God created man, and that God created man uniquely in his image. What does that mean? That I look like God? That God is bald? that God has greenish yellow eyes and he's about 6'1" tall and he's got white skin and all that sort of stuff? No, what it means to say that we are created in the image of God is that we have a spiritual makeup, that we have a soul. I want to close this by showing you a little parable that I think will help you understand a little bit more about the importance of understanding what man is. Now, what's a parable? Yeah, I hear some of you saying, well, that's an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. Yeah, that's right. That's a good definition. Who used parables? Yeah, Jesus did. And Jesus used parables because they can help us understand. I'm going to tell you this parable. I want to see if you can tell me what it means. It's called the Great King's Plan. Once upon a time, there was a great king. And this great king had a kingdom. And it was a beautiful place because the good king had planned this kingdom. And in this kingdom, there were people who followed the good king. And the good king and the good king's son and all of the people and the powers that worked with the good king made it wonderful for these people. They had a marvelous place. Everything they could ever want or anything they could ever need. But in this kingdom, there was a mean, nasty old servant. He looked at the good king and he saw the power and the wisdom and all the good things the good king had, and he was jealous. He said, man, I wish I was the king. I want to be the king. And so he got all the people that would follow him together and said, you know what we ought to do? We ought to get rid of that old boy, and you ought to make me the king. And if I was the king, I would make things special for you, and you would have a really special role in my kingdom. Now, you know when that kind of stuff goes on, pretty soon there's going to be a fight, isn't there? Going to be a problem. And so there was this battle that took place. The good king's servants, they were more dedicated to the good king. And good is always more powerful than evil. And so the good king won. He defeated the wicked servant. But now he had a problem. What was he going to do with the wicked servant? Now, he could destroy him. He could blow him up. But if he did that, all that would happen is somebody else would come along and do the same thing. And so what he really decided to do was to let the wicked servant do exactly what the wicked servant wanted to do. He restricted him, but he allowed him to do what he wanted to do. And so he sent the wicked servant away, never ever again to be able to be with the good king. But then the good king had another really neat idea. He created a beautiful, beautiful place. And in this place, he put some people. And these people were given everything they could ever want. All of the food they would ever need, everything that they would ever have to have in order to be able to live in this beautiful, beautiful place. But he also gave them a book. And in this book, he told them about the wicked servant and all the things that the wicked servant would want them to do. But he told them that if they would follow the good king's plan and live by the book that he gave them, they would eventually get to be in even a better place where they would live with the good king forever and ever and ever. Now, the wicked servant, he didn't want them to follow the good king's plan. And actually, even though his place wasn't very nice, he had been allowed to do exactly what he wanted to do. And anybody that wanted to serve him had been allowed to go and to serve him. Well, some of the people read the good king's plan, and their heart was filled with love. And they had a very happy life. And they knew that they were going to have something even better eventually. Now, the wicked servant, he didn't want them to follow the good king's plan. And so he offered them all kinds of stuff. Now, some of the people followed the good king's plan, and their heart was filled with love. And they were able to read the good king's plan and read his book, and their lives were blessed and happy because they did that. But some people threw the good king's plan away. They just discarded the book. They didn't want to follow the good king's plan, and they were mean and nasty and unpleasant. And that made the good king very unhappy. But he had given them a choice. And they had to decide who they were going to serve. Finally, after a long period of time, the good king called everybody together and he said, now, nobody gets any more choices. You've all decided who you're going to serve. Now, the wicked servant, he was really mad about that. He didn't want people to no longer have any choice. But he had decided what he was going to do, and anybody that wanted to serve him had been allowed to serve him. And the good king took all of those people that had followed the good king's plan and took them to a really, really special place. But those that had followed the wicked servant's plan were sent away, never, ever again to be able to be with the good king. And that beautiful place where God took all those who had followed him was the great king's plan from the very beginning. Okay, now that's the story. Who's the good king? Yeah, it's God, isn't it? And Jesus is his son. And who's the wicked servant? Yeah, it's Satan. And Satan is real, and Satan is alive, and Satan does awful things on this earth. And people have a choice of following Satan. And what's the book that the great king gave the people? Yeah, it's the Bible. It's the Bible. It tells us how to live. And who are the people? Yeah, it's us. It's you and it's me. And the reason we have church, and the reason that we are Christians, and the reason that we follow the Bible is because we want to be part of the good king's plan. We want to be with the good king forever and ever. And we want to live in a way that blesses others and helps others and makes this world a beautiful, beautiful place to be. The reason that you go to church, the reason that people teach the Bible, the reason that people give their lives to teaching about Jesus to others is because we want to help people find the best of this life and to be with God forever in even a greater plan. And in the rest of these videos, Ms. Weeb is going to share with you ways you can understand more and more about God's beautiful world and how you can be a part of the great King's plan.